Hello everyone, LVD here. Wizards sent me the Counter Blitz commander deck featuring Titus as our commander, and I'll be opening it today, taking a look, and then we'll be upgrading the deck as well, only using cards in the Final Fantasy universe. So let's get to it. Counter Blitz, can have a quick look at the back of the box and get a preview of some of the legendary creatures inside. We've got a little guide on how to play the deck, discussing some of the strategy that you might want to use while playing, and some of the rules of playing commander, as well as the alternate commander. Then we also get a little collector booster sample pack, so you get a taste of what it's like to open a collector booster, and then some punch-out tokens. This deck can certainly use a lot of +1/+1 counters, so surprised there's only 2. And then, of course, we've got the deck itself. So our commander is Titus Yuna's Guardian, and as alternate commander you could play with Yuna Grand Summoner. Next is Auron Venerated Guardian, Chocobo Knights, Gata and Lutzu. We've got Lord Jiskel Guado, Protection Magic, Summon Ixion, Summon Yojimbo, Summoner's Sending, Blitzball Stadium, Lulu Stern Guardian, Oaka Traveling Merchant, Riku Resourceful Guardian, Summon Veilfor, Master Seymour, or Maester Seymour I should say, Sphere Grid, Summon Magus Sisters, and of course all these saga creatures play well with a counter theme. Trommel Seymour's Butler, Yuna's Whistle, Yuna's Decision, Kimari Valiant Guardian, Shelinda Yevon Acolyte, Sin Unending Cataclysm, Waka Devoted Guardian, Collective Effort, Damning Verdict, Farewell, a Luminous Broodmoth, Promise of Loyalty, Resourceful Defense, Scholar of New Horizons, Sunscorch Regent, Together Forever, Chasm Skulker, Inexorable Tide, Pull from Tomorrow, Bane of Progress, Fight Rigging, Forgotten Ancients, and Generous Patron, Gyre Sage, Hardened Scales, Incubation Druid, Path of Discovery, a Rampant Rejuvenator, Tireless Tracker, Altered Ego, Endless Detour, Fathom Mage, and Walking Ballista, which can set up an infinite combo in this deck. I'll go over it in just a second. Then we've got our lanes with Brushland, Orchard, Canopy Vista, Flooded Grove. So we get a nice mix of some rare dual lanes, maybe not the best ones, no fetch lanes or shock lanes, but still a good amount of mana fixing, so we can hopefully cast our spells in time. And of course all with new art. Plenty of temples. Destroy Evil. Grateful Apparition to help us proliferate. Path to Exile. Offer you Counter Fuse. Dusk Shell Crawler. Farseek. Inspiring Call. 3 visits. A Bread for the Hunt. Arcane Signet. Everflowing Chalice. Soul Ring. And then we've got more lanes with Ash Barrens, Evolving Wilds, Forge of Heroes, couple more common dual lanes, Path of Ancestry, and then we're getting close to the basic lanes. We do get a Temple of the False God, Command Tower of course, and then the basic lanes with different arts. And we also get some tokens, treasure, clue on the back for Tireless Tracker. Get a couple of those. And then the 1/1 Spirit tokens with squids on the back. A couple of those, and then some more punch out. +1 counters, stun counters, etc. So they didn't leave us hanging. Now, before we move on to which cards I'm cutting from the deck, I did promise you an infinite combo, and it's pretty simple, and you can even pull it off as early as turn 3 if you're incredibly lucky. Turn 1, play Hardened Scales, so now every time we get a +1 counter, we get an additional counter. Then at turn 2, cast Walking Ballista for x = 1. It will enter with an additional counter thanks to Hardened Scales. So we've got a 2/2 Walking Ballista, which at any point can remove a +1 counter to deal 1 damage to any target. And then on turn 3, we cast Gata and Lutzu, targeting the Walking Ballista, saying if damage would be dealt to that creature this turn, prevent that damage and put that many +1/+1 counters on it. So the Ballista can now simply remove a +1 counter from itself to target itself with the ability. So normally it would deal 1 damage, but that damage is now prevented. We get an additional +1 counter, which thanks to Hardened Scales turns into 2 additional +1 counters. So now Walking Ballista can accumulate infinite +1/+1 counters, and eventually we can fire those at every single opponent to win the game on the spot. So that's a turn 3 infinite combo in a pre-constructed deck. So I'm not sure if we've seen that before, but I just wanted to point that out. Then now taking a look at the cards we're taking out of the deck, and compared to the other pre-con decks, it's not that many, so this is definitely the best deck straight out of the box, and it might just be the most powerful deck overall. But Forge of Heroes is gone, since we don't want colorless lanes in our 3-color deck if we can help it. The effect isn't all that powerful either. Then we've got Ash Barrens, another lane we're cutting, since we're adding some more colored sources instead. Then Path to Exile is efficient at 1 mana, but giving the opponent an extra land never feels great. If you really want a 1 mana removal spell within the Final Fantasy universe, you could just play Swords to Plowshares, which is in one of the other pre-con decks. Then there's Destroy Evil, also fine, but spot removal is usually not great in Commander. And while this one's a little bit more versatile than just a typical removal spell, we can find better options. Bread for the Hunt kind of does the same as our Commander. If we can deal damage to our opponents, we get to draw cards, so we don't really want to double up on that effect in case things go wrong, because then they will go horribly wrong. Endless Detour, another flexible removal spell, but it's never amazing, so I don't mind cutting it. We're also more of a tap-out deck, so we don't want to be keeping up a bunch of mana. Then a Resourceful Defense is an interesting effect, but is just a little pricey for what it does. Then a Summoner's Sending can be decent in certain matchups, especially decks that rely on the graveyard, but if our opponents aren't actively putting creatures in the graveyard, then we may not get a chance to trigger it at all, so then it doesn't do much for us. Yuna's Whistle, also a playable card, but for 3 mana, we're not necessarily getting a ton of value out of this. Yuna's Decision would be much better in a deck with a higher curve, where we can cheat some very expensive creatures into play. That's not really the case here, so we're not getting the most out of it. Path of Discovery, another decent card that you could certainly play, but overall we can find more efficient ways to put +1 counters on our creatures. Pull from Tomorrow doesn't really fit the theme of the deck all that much. Duskshell Crawler is also fine, giving creatures trample is relevant, but it's a little bit underpowered, even though it's a 2-drop of course. But another card I'm taking out. Generous Patron can also come in handy. Sometimes you can play politics with it, giving opponents additional counters, and then you get to draw cards. If that's a playstyle you enjoy, then you might want to keep that in. But I'm usually not a fan of giving the opponent extra resources. Then Auron can be a powerful card if it gets to attack, but in a deck without really any haste effects, it's a little slow to get going, and then eventually the opponent will get their stuff back after they deal with Auron. Then Altered Ego can clone a creature, maybe put some additional +1 counters on it. We're not making a ton of mana to sink into this card, and if we copy our own creatures, a lot of them are legendaries, so then we're counting on the opponent having something juicy to copy, which may not always be the case. Then the Sunscorch Regents can pick up some additional counters and some life, but for 5 mana we can find something better. And at 7 mana, the Unending Cataclysm kind of wants us to go all in on one creature. Has built-in flying and trample admittedly, but I would much rather diversify my threats. So those are the cards I'm taking out. And then now we get to add a bunch of cards to the deck as well, starting with our towns for added mana fixing. Also wanted to increase the overall land count in the deck. We've got some of the adventure towns, with the Ancient Metropolis also playing well with the +1 counter theme, as well as the Seed Academy, another blue-green dual land. Can also maybe transform into a vehicle. Then we've got Rampant Growth, as well as Nature's Lore out of the Cloud Commander deck, giving us some more cheap 2-mana ramp options. And then there's Reach the Horizon at 4 mana, which can maybe find some of the towns that we've just added. Got the Earth Crystal, which is very synergistic, discounting our green spells, which is the primary color, giving us additional +1 counters, and for 6 mana can also activate it to distribute those additional counters as well. Then Clash of the Icons replaces some of the removal spells we've taken out. This can be used as a fight spell, but it can also synergize with our enchantment creatures, since we can maybe add or remove lore counters from our sagas, and we'll be adding some of those creatures as well. Then Sword of Truth and Justice, aka Tidus's Brotherhood Sword, of course very on-brand in the deck, and can also help us proliferate. Got Zac Fair, which can maybe protect a key creature, make it indestructible, and can also move +1 counters around afterwards. Got Garnet, which also plays well with all the Saga creatures. We've got Summon Fenrir, adding another Saga creature enchantment that can then help us ramp, give us an extra +1 counter. Then Saz Catsroy can give us additional +1 counters each turn. We've got Summon Shiva, which plays well with those stun counters, as we can maybe keep proliferating them to keep opposing creatures locked down. And then Yuna can also maybe recur some of those enchantment creatures out of the graveyard. And then topping off our curve, Omega Heartless Evolution, another way to produce stun counters, which we can then hopefully proliferate. Now it's time to open our Collector Booster Sample Pack. I've kept you waiting long enough. So first we get an add card, and then Yuna's Whistle would go right into the deck, except for the fact that we just took it out. And our final card, I'm not gonna try and pronounce, but another card from the Commander decks. Alright, so no huge hits in our sample pack, but that's alright. I wanna thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.